Hey, welcome to the first chapter of English literature. I'm Harshika, your English educator for study. Let's just begin with the chapter. Before we begin, there are going to be two parts of a chapter. One a prose or a story, and another would be a poetry. Right now, we are going to start with the prose. So let's start. The fun they had. It's the name of the story. So whenever we begin with the story, it's really important to know who exactly has written it. So the author is Isaac Asimov. Now he's an American writer and a professor of biochemistry. He's a person who's from science background who has done a lot of research in it. But he has written a lot of science fiction books, 500 books as it is mentioned, and 90,000 letters and postcards. Now that is a huge amount when it comes to people who are writing and who are into literature as well as in other varied fields. So, what is the theme of the story? The main theme of the story is education. Since the author is a science background person and is also an academic writer, so his theme is education and it is set in a future. Like it is not of this time. The author has imagined a future where kids and the people they have everything moved digital. The schools like now, the books right now, the scenarios right now of education won't exist. Now everything has been computerized and arranged in his story, in his future. So we are going to start. How we are going to do this is I'll just orate whatever has been written and then I'll make you explain how exactly the author is making us aware about the things. Margie even wrote about it that night in her diary. On the page headed 17 May 2157, she wrote, "Today Tommy found a real book." Now, how the story starts? The story is set in a scene, as you can just visualize whatever we are going to study today. Is that Margie is a girl, she's writing down her diary. And her diary is dated on 17th May 2157. That is, the year 2157 is going on, many centuries later. And she's writing that Tommy has found a real book. Now, Tommy is another person in the story. There are two characters who are going to just interact in between them, and most of the story will revolve around them. Now, see, she has written found a real book. Now, that phrase particularly means that at their time in the future, there is no such thing as books. That's the reason she is quite fascinated and quite surprised about it. It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him that there was a time when all stories were printed on paper. Now, see how long back she's talking about. She's saying Margie, the person who's writing the diary, her grandfather, when he was little, then his grandfather told him that there was a time when books were actually printed on paper. As we mentioned, as we talked about in the theme of the story, that it is somewhat set in the future where everything has been computerized. So, similarly, everything, schools, books, reading material, everything has moved from paper to screen to a virtual background, a virtual arena where everything is being computerized. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to on a screen. Now, she's saying that, okay, now a concept of a book printed on a paper was very funny to her, was very surprising because, first of all, since the book was old, so it was really crinkly. There were a lot of wrinkles on it. There were a lot of lines because of manhandling of the book. Okay, and then she was quite surprised because once on a screen, the words actually float while you're reading. You can just swipe through them and you can understand them there. But here it was just fixed at a particular place. It couldn't move. There should be no effects. There can't be any visual effects in a printed book. And then, when they turned back to the page before, it had the same words on it than it had when they read it the first time. Now, again, once we are reading something on a screen, we just turn it out and then a different paper comes. Actually, nothing is changing, just the words they change. But in a real book, since it's printed on paper and everything is fixed. So she finds it funny since she is not habitual of seeing a book that okay, I turn the page, but on the previous page, again the same words are there. Now that is something she found really funny and interesting at the same time. Gee, said Tommy, what a waste. When you're through with the book, just throw it away, I guess. Our television screen must have had a million books on it and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away. Now, when Tommy exclaimed G, so he said, okay, it's such a waste. See, only limited amount of paper, limited amount of words. You can write only one thing and it's going to be stuck and fixed forever on it. So it has no value for them. You can just, go to the television. Lot many books have been stored there. You can just browse through it and you can read through it. There is no need of actually keeping book. It takes up space. It is fixed in amount. You can't read much, and it is really difficult to maintain. Same with mine, said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen as many telebooks as Tommy had since he was 13. So what happens is Margie is saying that okay, I also agree with you. And telebooks are like lot more. Since she's 11, she has read less books compared to Tommy since he's 13. So now here their ages are mentioned. That Margie is 11 and Tommy is 13. She said, where did you find it? She's asking Tommy, okay, where did you exactly find this old book? So Tommy's mentioning, in my house. He pointed without looking because he was busy reading in the attic. Now, attic, we'll come to know about the term exactly a bit later, but here I can explain that it is a place to store things. What it is about. Now, Margie's again asking what it is exactly about. Then again, Tommy mentions school. Now, with school. Now see crinkly, you can see the picture here. The picture here actually shows that it is having lines. So that is what we call crinkly. Now attic, you can see that it is a storeroom. It's usually above the house, like below the roof and above the last bedroom we have. So a small space where all the things which aren't being utilized currently are kept. So once Tommy mentioned that it is written about school, the book is containing information about school. Now Marge is confused. She's like, "Oh, why school? What's there to write about school?" I hate school. Now Margie doesn't like school at all. Margie has always hated school, but now she is hating it more than ever. Now let's find out why Margie exactly hates it. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. Now, here we are actually talking about why Margie hates school. Now, in her time in the future, there's a mechanical teacher, a computer with an artificial intelligence, and it had started giving her tests after tests of geography, and she wasn't able to understand the topic. And obviously, if she's not able to understand, then she won't be able to actually score the tests. So, seeing her performance, her mother was really frustrated. She was really sad, and what she did was asked her to just, call the county inspector. Now, who is the county inspector here? That's the question. So, he was a round little man with a red face and a whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at Margie and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Now, county inspector here is a person who what he does is he just brings a toolbox with him, okay, and it's made up of wires and screwdrivers, spanners, whatever it is necessary to actually fix a mechanical thing. And he gives Margie an apple so that it's a kind of a treat from his side that okay, nothing's going to feel bad about it, just nothing's going to happen, and you just have the apple. I'll fix the things, and then he just opens up the mechanical teacher. Margie had hoped he wouldn't know how to put it together again. But he knew how all right, and after an hour or so, there it was again, large and black and ugly, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. Now she was hoping, okay, what if the county inspector is not able to fix the mechanical teacher? He might take it away, and she wouldn't have to just study with that boring teacher again and again. But the county inspector just fixed it up, and after an hour, again she saw that black screen, large and black. Okay, now again she has to study, so she was really bothered about it. That wasn't so bad. The part Margie hated the most was the slot where she had to put the homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in a punch code they made her learn when she was 6 years old. And the mechanical teacher calculated the marks in no time. Now, that wasn't only the bad part. What actually made Margie hate this school most was that she had to put her homework, and for those homework, she had to punch in some codes. And see, she's only 11, and she had to learn the punch codes, which made her enabled her to actually put the homework when she was 6 years old. Now, see the difference. See that in such young age, they have to learn so many things that makes her pressurized, that made her actually hate school. And the mechanical teacher, again, it didn't took any time since the teacher was not human, so quickly the teacher just evaluated her homework and evaluated her sheets, and then it just got the answer in no time. Now again, the key terms, scornful. See, when we first mentioned that, okay, Margie was scornful when she was saying, okay, who writes about school? So that is showing that exactly something is worthless here. She didn't think that a book should be worthy enough for writing about school since she hated school. And slot is a proper space or time or a position which is given. So the inspector had smiled after he was finishing, and he was patting Margie's head like this. He said to her mother, "It's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared up a little too quick. Those things happen sometimes." Now, the county inspector, he is just appreciating Margie and telling her mom, Mrs. Jones, that it's not Margie's fault that she was failing the test. It's just that in the mechanical teacher, they have adjustments. So, the geography syllabus was paced very fast, not according to a 10-year-old, 10 to 11-year-old child, but more than that. And because of that, she was failing the test again and again. And that is something that happens. There are some technical glitches. So that's what he's mentioning to her mother. I've slowed it up to an average 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory. And he patted Margie's head again. Now, what happens is he's continuing explaining to her mother that I have just, set the pace again. Now she can study and she's doing really well according to her age group students. Margie was disappointed. She had been hoping that they would take the teacher away altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector had blanked out. Now, she was hoping, just like at that time when Tommy was having issues, since there was no lecture, no topic of history on his mechanical teacher. So, what she was hoping was that maybe her mechanical teacher would also be carried away like that, but it didn't happen. So, she was really disappointed about it. So, she was thinking all of this, and that's the reason she hated school. Now, again, we are back to a scenario where she and Tommy are actually sitting and are discussing about the book. So, she's asking Tommy, why would anyone write about school? Now, Tommy, he looked at her with very superior eyes. Now, the term superior eyes here means that, okay, he's looking like this, and he was like, doesn't she know that? With that kind of an expression, he's saying that because it's not our kind of school, stupid. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years ago. He added, loftily pronouncing the word carefully, centuries ago. Now, what he's trying to imply is that the kind of school that particular book is talking about is not of their times, not the mechanical teacher, but centuries ago. Her great grandfather's great grandfather, when he was a kid, how he used to go to schools. That is, today's concept of schooling is what is written in that particular book. Then, Margie was hurt. Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all those years ago. She read the book over his shoulder for a while, then said, anyways, they had a teacher. Now, Margie was hurt by the way Tommy was talking to her, and she said, well, okay, I don't know how that happened. It's like so much time back, centuries back, you are saying. Then what she did it, like Tommy was sitting here, she was sitting here, so she just leaned over to his shoulder, and what he did was, she started reading the book. Now, once she started reading the book, she mentioned a particular thing that they had a teacher. Now, it's obvious that in a school we have teachers, so let's check out the key terms. Geared, adjusted to a particular standard level. So, the county inspector had geared, he had just adjusted the level to that of a 10-year-old. Then, loftily, in a superior way. That's how Tommy was talking to Margie. Sure, they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man. Now, according to Margie and Tommy, a regular teacher is a mechanical teacher during their times. But Tommy is actually mentioning But at that time, they had an actual person who was teaching rather than that of a mechanical object. So then Margie says, a man? How could a man be a teacher? She was really surprised because they don't have teachers, human beings as teachers. Well, he just told the boys and girls things and gave them homework and asked them questions. Now, Tommy here is actually explaining and he's making the person aware, making Margie aware that that person who used to be a teacher was used to be an actual human being, and he used to tell boys and girls about what all things they study, and then he used to give them homework, and then they used to ask lot of questions. A man isn't smart enough, Margie exclaimed. She just said, okay, a man isn't smart enough more than that of a mechanical teacher. Sure, he is. My father knows as much as my teacher. Now, again, as soon as she exclaims that, okay, man is not as smart as that of a computer, then Tommy says that it's not true. His father actually is capable of remembering everything and he knows as much as his mechanical teacher. So, again, he says the same thing. He knows almost as much. Okay, I betcha. Now, betcha is a term here. He's actually betting that, okay, you can bet me with anything, whatever our mechanical teacher knows, he also knows. Margie wasn't prepared to fight. She didn't want to fight about it, any dispute about it. So she said, I wouldn't want a strange man in my house to teach me. She moves on with a different argument. Okay, first she mentioned that a man cannot be as good as a computer. Then Tommy refused her, so she doesn't want to have an argument with Tommy. So she moves on to the next statement, which she thinks her next opinion, that she didn't want a strange man to come to her house and make her study. So now again, Tommy, he started screaming with laughter. You don't know much, Margie. The teachers didn't live in the house. They had a special building and all the kids went there. And all the kids learned the same thing. So now Tommy's mentioning that, okay, silly, the teacher didn't come individually to everyone's house and teach. He used to call them together in a building, and all the kids went there. So she's again surprised. Okay, all the kids they learn the same things. So then Tommy says that sure, if they were the same age. Now Tommy is actually explaining the concept of a classroom, that same age group kids they come together in the same class. A teacher comes in and teaches them similar things. Then Margie again says, but my mother says a teacher has to be adjusted to the fit of mind of each boy and girl it teaches, and that each kid has to be taught differently. Now she's saying that, okay, my mom says that everyone has a different capacity to learn. Some might be really smart enough to understand more, some might not be able to do that, and some might be just average. So she's just explaining that, okay, that's what my mother says. So wouldn't it be more effective to have a mechanical teacher rather than that of a person? Some can learn a bit early, some can learn a bit late, and some are really average about the things. So as soon as she mentions about it, Tommy says, just the same, they didn't do it that way then. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the book. Now Tommy is really frustrated and he's like, okay, if you don't agree with them, if you're having so many arguments and issues about it, then you can't, you don't need to read the book. So then Margie exclaimed that I didn't say I didn't like it. She said like really quickly, and she wanted to read the book about those funny schools. Now she's finding this school really funny because it is somewhat dissimilar to the kind of concept of schooling she's going through right now. They weren't even half finished through the book when Margie's mother called. Margie, school. Margie looked up. Not yet, Mama. Now, they were just reading the book. They were really engrossed in the book. And then at that time, Margie's mom just calls up and she's like, okay, now it's time for school. Margie, you need to come and you need to study. So she denies that, okay, I'm really interested in the book. I don't want to just go and study the school. So regular means normal, betcha means bet you. It's in a that of a speech, in a sense of a speech we speak usually when we are speaking quite fast. So then again we continue with the story, and now, said Mrs. Jones, and it's probably time for Tommy too. Margie said to Tommy, can I read books some more with you after school? Now, since Mrs. Jones is her mother, Margie can't refuse her much, and she's also mentioning that okay, it's time for Tommy to also go and study in the study through the school. So then Margie is asking Tommy that okay, can I read the book with you afterwards? Like maybe after school we can read. So Tommy here is now again becoming superior and he's like, okay, maybe, he said nonchalantly. He walked away whistling, the old dusty book tucked beneath his arm. So what he did is he just took the book, he took his hand, he just tucked it there and he just went out by saying maybe. Margie went into the schoolroom. It was right next to her bedroom and the mechanical teacher was on. Everyone waiting for her. It was always at the same time every day except Saturday and Sunday because her mother said little girls learned better if they learned at regular hours. Now, what happens is just like we have school a separate building right now, similarly, in Margie's time in the future, what happens is that there is a bedroom, and then in the next room, it's a schoolroom. The mechanical teacher, the screen is set there, and she needs to sit there and she needs to study more of like a study room. This is a schoolroom because she didn't go to school and everything that has been usually taught in schools is taught in that room. So she just calls the study room her schoolroom. And her mother thinks that it's better to be on right time on a schedule, having a proper timetable, rather except that of the weekends because weekends are usually considered holidays. The screen was lit up and it said, today's arithmetic lesson is on the addition of proper fractions. Please insert yesterday's homework in the proper slot. Now, what happens is Margie is actually telling her that okay, now it's time for her to study. She goes there, and then on the screen, on the mechanical teacher, it's showing that today she is going to have her first lesson as that of arithmetics. She study addition of fractions, and before that, she needs to insert the homework in the proper slot. The one thing she hates most about school, submitting homework in that proper slot, and then again it's asked from her. Margie did it so with a sigh. She was like, okay, once again, doing it. She was thinking about the old schools they had when her grandfather's grandfather was a little boy. So now what happens is earlier she was thinking that concept really funny, but now she starts to think, okay, what would have happened if I had that particular school? I went to a school. All the kids from whole neighborhood came laughing and shouting in the school. And now Margie's thinking, okay, what happened if I used to go to a school? Okay, then there were a lot many kids would be there. I would be playing with them, having fun with them, studying with them together. They would be of my age, and we'll be going home together in the end of the day. They learn the same thing so they could help each and another with the homework too and talk about it. And teachers were real people rather than a mechanical teacher who at one pace would speak again and again and again and it would make boring for her. So see, now she's understanding and maybe she started to like that funny school concept she earlier thought. The mechanical teacher was flashing on the screen when we had fractions 1 by 2 and 1 by 4 and Margie. Soon as the arithmetic lesson just started on the screen, she started thinking about how kids of the old days would really love about going school and she was thinking about all the fun they had. That's the reason we are having the name of the chapter as Fun They Had. So let's check out the key terms. Nonchalantly is for not showing much interest or enthusiasm because Tommy again he was thinking that okay I know more about the thing so it's better I'll be like okay I'm superior to her. And dispute means to disagree with. Now we have some questions. You pause the video, you see the question and you can maybe write down. This will solve two purposes. First one would be that it will help you understand the chapter better. You learn the things. Secondly, you will also learn how to write the answers. Starting with the first question. How old are Margie and Tommy? Now, once we go back in the chapter, in the beginning of the chapter, what we remember is that Margie is 11 years old and Tommy is 13 years old when we had that telebooks scene. Second question. What did Margie write in her diary? Now, the chapter actually started with this. So, what we'll say is that Margie wrote in her diary about the time when Tommy found a real book, and that book was based on schools, the earlier schools centuries ago. Next question. Had Margie even seen a book before? Now, what would be the answer? The answer would be no. Margie didn't know what a book was earlier, as it can be seen from the first statement she wrote in her diary that Tommy found a real book. She didn't know what all concept was there, what exactly the things were there, and she find it really funny that there are books which are actually printed on paper. What things about the book did she find strange? Now, there are a lot of things. We'll list them out one by one. First of all, it was fixed on paper. Then the words weren't dancing, that is, there were no animations present. Third, whenever she turned the book, the pages and the words, they stayed on the same pages. So these three things were different. Then again, it was written on schools, and schools were really different. They didn't have same similar structure as that of a mechanical teacher. The kids used to go of same age group used to go to same classes. They used to come together in a building, common building on school, and the teachers were actually humans. So these are the some things which we can write about, both about what was written in the book and what she found strange about the book. What do you think a telebook is? Now, this is really simple. You can just simply mention that the books in the digital form which are stored on the television in the future at that time when Margie and Tommy are present, those are called telebooks.